Actually, mechanical hydraulic lever valves. I should say mechanical lever that open and close the hydraulic valves. You follow on that? This is actually a lever going in and opening and closing the hydraulic valve. Okay. Does this look to you to be tough for me to do? It's not hard. So that begs the question that why did we outfit our newer trucks with electrical switches for this? So someone thought this was too hard, and so they said we got to make it easier on them, and now they have an electrical switch similar to this to deploy their stabilizers. And sometimes they have the controllers for the aerial are electrical in nature. The reason I want to point that out is once we've made these electrical and that electrical up there, now we've made these reliant on the aerial master as well. My preference would be to stick with this because anytime we know with electrical work, it's prone to failure. I would prefer to keep it simple right here. The reason I say that, just going back to what I want to make sure that we're clear on what is reliant on that aerial master. If the aerial master goes out on Quint 15, we got a lot of work on our hands because now our frontline stabilizer controls are out of service. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay. There's going to be a part of everybody's brain, hopefully. Some people might not have one, judging by their actions. A part of your brain that says, there should be a part of your brain that's going to say, I'm about to do something stupid, don't do it. And that's where the safety interlocks come into play. All right. The safety interlocks on this truck, on your straight sticks, there's going to be two safety interlocks we're going to be worried about. The first one is called the stabilizer aerial safety interlock. And the purpose of that interlock is twofold. It's going to catch you coming and going on any aerial operation. It's going to prevent you from raising the aerial out of the cradle before it's stabilized, before we get 4 green lights here. And it's going to prevent you from moving those 4 stabilizers before the aerial's in the cradle on the back side. Everybody follow on that? Sure. Stabilizer aerial safety interlock. Makes sense, doesn't it? You wouldn't want to move stabilizers if this thing is 100 foot in the air off 90 degrees at 45 degree elevation. Bad idea, right? And you wouldn't want to you wouldn't want to try to raise this thing out if we weren't stabilized, obviously. That's our first portion of our brain that's going to prevent us from doing stupid things. Next portion of our brain, the next safety interlock is called the rotational interlock. Are we all familiar with the concept of short jacking? Okay. There's going to be a portion of this computer that's going to prevent us from rotating over to a side that is short jacked. Okay? If we have a malfunction or failure in our motor, our power takeoff, or our frontline hydraulic pump, we have a backup plan. Here it's labeled emergency hydraulic power. In other places you'll see it labeled and on our skill sheet as EPU, and that stands for electrical power unit or emergency power unit. You'll see it written both ways in the same manual, and that's kind of what I was getting at before, how they can get a little confusing. What is this going to do for us? What this is going to do for us is, like I said, if we lose that frontline motor, power takeoff, or hydraulic pump, this is our backup. And what it's going to the way this is set up is we now have a smaller hydraulic pump that is powered by batteries. Okay, so basically, if we have a failure way upstream, power source or pump, this can help us out. If we lose a hydraulic line and we're leaking hydraulic fluid, if a valve seizes up on us or a cylinder is messed up, this ain't going to help us. We clear on that? This is way upstream. Power source and pump. This is where this is going to help us. the correlation that I try to tell people to put in their minds is picture 18-wheeler with a big beefy tractor hauling that load down the road, and now the tractor breaks down. That's our frontline hydraulics. Now we're bringing in a Prius to try to tow that load down the road. That's what we're doing here. So we're not going to be doing things nearly as quickly and nearly as efficiently as we're used to with the frontline hydraulics. We clear on that? Okay. A couple more things real quick about this one. Let's see here.
Now, is it meant to deploy the aerial, or is it only meant to bring it back down?
Good question. I think that's where I was trying to go. I would say most of the time, it's gonna the operation at this point is gonna be defensive in nature. So we're trying to get it out of a collapse zone. We're trying to get it away from power lines, something of that case, right? But this is why we want you to train on it and realize the capabilities within reason, because let's say I have somebody hanging out of a window and I have a hydraulic failure. Well, this aerial is still 10 feet away from that windowsill. You better believe I'm going to want the driver to know that he can use this to get it that last 10 feet. So you're definitely on the right track, that because it's not the work capability is much smaller, we need to have a much different mindset. But sometimes if there's a job to get done, we got to get it done one way or the other. So this is a tool that we could use. Does that make sense? Okay. Thanks for asking that question. That kind of got me back on track. So a couple housekeeping items about this thing. 30 minutes on, 30 minutes off is the rule that you'll see in the manual about how long you can use this thing before you have to give it a rest. 30 minutes on, 30 minutes off. I would say that would be in the middle of an important operation. For training purposes, I would say let's not go anywhere near that, because like we said, this is the Prius trying to pull a large trailer down I-35. You know, we're gonna if we stress it too much, we're gonna wear it out. Sounds good?
Are we gonna, if we don't do 30 minutes, say we do 5, whatever reason, we just need it for 5 minutes, are we suggesting we wait 5 minutes, we go again, or still within that 30 minutes?
I would say ideally, yes. I would say give it as much rest as you can. If we're going 30 minutes, it better be for what I was kind of talking about before. Right. We're trying to get out of a collapse zone, or we are trying to like make a rescue under less than ideal conditions. Like, I guess don't go out and go training with your crew and say, hey, we worked it for 29 minutes and 59 seconds, so we're all good. You know, I wouldn't want to put that wear on this under non-emergent circumstances. Does that make sense? So if you work it for 5 minutes and you can give it a rest, give it a rest. If you work it for 5 minutes and you still got to get the job done, do it knowing that you're stressing this thing out even more. Okay. Next thing about operations of this, they don't want you to deadhead this. And what does that mean? That means that we want to have an open hydraulic valve somewhere before we pull this, so that there's a place for this pressurized fluid to go, so that we don't overheat this pump. Make sense? So kind of a two-person operation. One person's going to open the valve, and one person's going to flip this switch. Sounds good? One other thing that I'll talk about the EPU is not all EPUs are created equally. Okay? On Quint 3, I think you're going to find 4 EPUs. EPU switches in 4 different locations on the newer trucks. You're going to find one at each stabilizer control station, one here, and one at the aerial control station, and then a super special EPU down here. The three up here, over here, and up there are similar in nature. This one is different, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it, and then we'll demonstrate it later. This EPU is going straight to the battery. Okay? Whereas the other EPUs are reliant on electrical master. So if we lose electrical master, those EPUs are out of service. Does that make sense? We're going to have to go to this one. Sounds good? Okay. Now that we're on the loss of electricity, let's talk about if we have a loss of electrical power. If we have a loss of electrical power, a complete loss, no aerial master, all our control panels, all our lights, and all our switches that are electrical in nature are done. But as long as we still have PTO, we're still good to go. I mean, not completely good to go, but we're not, let's say we're not out of service, which is what a lot of people might think if they can't get aerial master back here. If we still got hydraulic power, are these relying on electricity? No. So we can still move the control. The aerial controls are not relying on electricity either. So if we have hydraulic power, we can still operate this thing, but a lot of the very valuable pieces of information that we typically have, we're not going to have. See what I'm getting at? So if we lose the aerial master, we're still in the game, but we better be very deliberate and observant about everything we're doing so that we don't do something stupid. Everybody follow on that? So we got our frontline muscle system, the hydraulics, and what happens if we lose that, we go to the EPU. If we lose the certain portions of it, we go to the EPU, right? Then we have our frontline brain system. What happens if we lose that? Then we go, there's no real backup system except that the way this truck is set up is that these are mechanical in nature, so they're not reliant on electricity. Make sense? Any place like Quint 15 or Quint 3 where these are electrical in nature, there's going to be another location where you're actually going to have physical mechanical valves that you can open and close. Make sense? So some are better than others. Okay, the part of the brain, like we said, that's going to prevent us from doing something stupid is the safety interlocks. They're going to prevent us from rolling this truck by moving the aerial without being stabilized, moving stabilizers with the aerial up in the air, or rotating over to a short jack side. All of those things are bad ideas. So having the safety interlocks is a good thing unless they malfunction, which they can and probably will at some point. I've seen it. So the only reason we would ever use the overrides is if we could verify that the safety interlocks were malfunctioning. Does that make sense? Okay. Quick story. We were over here with ladder 36. They short jacked to one side, knowing that their operation is going to be completely on the opposite side of the truck from being short jacked. The sensors, which are electrical in nature again, so you can see how they could possibly malfunction. It's not outside of our realm for that to happen. Ladder 36 short jacks to one side, and when they go to swing the aerial over to their operational fully extended side, it won't let them. And then just to check it out, they swing it over the short jack side and it will let them. So you can see how the safety interlocks were on the fritz. So in that case, once you verify it with your buddy and say, I'm not about to roll this truck, right? And you said, no, you're good. This thing is messing up. Let's override it to get this job done. Are we good with that? I want to stress to you, and I think this is another reason why we didn't present these things as well as we could have historically, is because I remember getting the word from shops. They weren't as strong about it on this one, but I remember the word from shops is the rotational overrides, we're not allowed to touch them. Don't touch them. Because they were afraid we were going to roll the truck. And we have to touch them under very controlled circumstances so we know how to use them if the truck is malfunctioning and it's sensing a configuration that it's not actually in. Does that make sense? So I'm going to tell you you should never override a functioning safety interlock. Never override it. You should never go to a short jack side. Unless we're very controlled about it, and we'll do it right here just to show you guys how to work them in case it were malfunctioning. Does that make sense? We got to be crystal clear on that one. Because, okay, never override a functioning safety interlock unless the intent is to, under very controlled circumstances, train and make sure you actually know how to use overrides. Sounds good?